and welcome to the essay series. Today you're going to learn how to engage in peer editing. The first thing you're going to need is your completed essay. And the next thing you're going to need are your notes. So open up a new tab and type in tinyurl.com/ELA-module2. For this virtual lecture, we are going to be working with slide number 11. So go ahead and scroll down to slide number 11, where you will see your notes. So let's take a look at them. When giving peer feedback, it is important to think about a few different things. So we'll look at the left-hand side of the slide first. The purpose of giving peer feedback is to give somebody else feedback while also gaining feedback on your own work before you turn your work in to be graded. Having another pair of eyes can be a good way to catch little mistakes or realize that you thought something made sense, but it totally doesn't make sense when somebody else reads it. Happens to me all the time. The next thing you're going to need is the grading rubric that I am going to use to grade your work. So go ahead and open that up in another tab. The last thing that you want to consider is your goal. So in order to establish your goal, you're going to choose two areas of the grading rubric, which we'll take a look at in a second, to focus on after first reading over the essay. So let's take a look at the grading rubric. The first area that you're going to be graded on are your ideas and content. This is a good place to start because you want to make sure your person's essay is well focused, meaning that if they're arguing that the theme is race and they're using tone, conflict, and figurative language to prove that, they should only be focusing on those things in their essay and nothing else. The main idea stands out in thesis and is supported by accurate details. They need to have a really great thesis statement that very clearly states what they're going to argue, and you should be able to identify it in the introductory paragraph. The last part of the grading rubric is about details. So look in their support paragraph to make sure that the information that they gave to support their thesis statement actually matches the thesis statement and that they're not just giving random information. The next part of the grading rubric is organization. If you take a look at the person's essay, you should be able to very clearly identify an introduction, which you can grade using this first category here, and a conclusion, which is the very last part of the essay. And if you went over those modules with me, then you know that the very end of the essay needs to tie into the very beginning of the essay to give some closure. You want to make sure that the essay that you're reading has good transitions, that the pacing of the essay isn't too slow. Make sure that the person doesn't go into detail about things that they don't need to go into detail about, and that they also go into lots of detail with things that they need to go into lots of detail about. And make sure that the order of ideas makes sense. So you wouldn't want a support paragraph and then an introductory paragraph. You want to make sure that they're not missing any paragraph types. And then make sure that they also have a title. If the title isn't that interesting, that's okay. But it needs to relate to whatever they're arguing in the essay. The next category is voice. Make sure that the tone of the essay is interesting and appropriate, that the author seems to actually care about what they're talking about, rather than just mindlessly sort of writing about it. Give the author these 4 points if while reading the essay you can actually start to hear that person's voice in your head as you're reading it. And you should also make sure that the voice is appropriate, meaning that they are not writing in first person, that the essay is written in third person academic voice, and that there's no slang being used. The next category is word choice. So if someone means to say upset, but they actually say sad, or if a person means to say Maya Angelou is a precise writer, but what they really say is she's a good writer, then that means that the word choices are not exactly precise. So make sure that the words chosen in your essay are easy for you to understand and that you can follow the ideas really clearly. And you want to make sure that there are some good vocabulary words like tone, conflict, figurative language, theme, cultural perspective used in the essay. The next category is sentence fluency. So you want to make sure that the sentences vary in terms of how short or long they are. You want to make sure that the sentence structure is strong, meaning there are no crazy run-on sentences or short, abrupt sentence fragments, and that the sentences tie one idea to the next idea. The next category is called conventions. That's basically about grammar and punctuation. In many cases, the essay that you're reading may really need for you to evaluate this category. So don't be afraid. If you aren't quite sure if the spelling is correct, feel free to Google it. If you're not sure if the punctuation is correct, you can ask a neighbor or you can ask me. But chances are the essay you're reading really needs you to pay attention to this category. So be sure that you are making sure the grammar makes sense, the spelling is correct, capitalize the first word of the first sentence and all proper nouns. Make sure that periods and commas are used in the right places and that the tense remains the same, meaning that if somebody says the word run, that means that all tenses should be in present tense and nowhere in the text should they say ran or will run. The last part is presentation. This you're going to evaluate by looking at the person's use of MLA format. So make sure that the person has formatted their essay correctly. So now that you understand the grading rubric, let's go ahead and go back to our quick notes and wrap up before we jump into editing an essay. So we're going to use the feedback sandwich model, which is kind of like a cheeseburger. So you want to start with the bun, which is a compliment, right? So you want to start by making sure you say something good about the person's writing. Even if you don't think anything is good about the person's writing, you need to make something up because it's important to compliment the writing so that the person can take your suggestions for improvement without feeling threatened by them. So the next thing you're going to do is find a couple places where the person can improve. And then lastly, you want to give the person another compliment. So tell them something else that they did really well. All right, so now that you are an expert in how to peer edit, let's look at an example together. So here's my essay. We're going to pretend that I am a different person editing my essay. And we're going to read over my essay. All right, I just read over my essay. Hopefully you will take your time while reading your partner's essay. The next thing I need to do is, based on what I've read, decide which areas I need to evaluate using the rubric. So again, you don't need to evaluate all the areas of the rubric. You're just going to pick a couple. So while I was reading, I noticed that my sentence fluency doesn't exactly make sense in some places. So I'm going to spend some time going over sentence fluency and making sure that my ideas aren't all over the place, that I'm using lots of different types of sentences, and that the reader is able to understand one idea and then the next idea based on how I structure my sentences. The other category I think I'm going to evaluate is organization. In some places in this person's essay, I noticed that they gave details that didn't need to be there. And I also thought that the conclusion paragraph had some details that needed to be given earlier. So the organization didn't make sense to me. So I'm going to spend some time editing this essay using the organization part of the rubric. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is go to File, press Make a Copy, and then I'm going to share my copy of the score sheet with the person that I'm editing it for. So you're going to have to exchange email addresses. So I'm going to type in the person's email address that I'm doing the editing for and make sure I send it to them. Now, I can go ahead and start grading this person's essay. So I'm going to give me these scores based on what I read. Now, rather than just giving the person numbers, you want to actually give the person some actual feedback based on our feedback sandwich model. So in order to do that, you are going to add comments. So let's start with a compliment. I really like this quote. So I'm going to press Insert, Comment, and I'm going to tell the person, great quote. It's very moving. Nice way to start. And press Comment. Now that person can see that and they'll be like, oh, awesome, I used a great quote. The next thing I need to do is suggest some improvement. So one of the areas that I scored the person down on was organization. And I said that the sequencing wasn't so logical and it wasn't so easy for me to move from start to finish. So I'm going to highlight a particular example towards the end of the support paragraph. And in my comment, I'm going to say something like, this sentence would be best if you moved it before you insert your evidence. And now I'm going to say why. It serves as great background information. And I'm going to press comment. So I hope that this has been informative for you now that you are an expert in how to peer edit. Good luck to you. Be sure to use the grading rubric and use your notes to help you. And let me know if I can answer any of your questions. Good luck, and thank you for listening.